Restaurant Unstoppable, inspire, empower, and transform the industry. With excitement, allow me to introduce you today's guest, CEO and founder of Rever Networks, Inc., Paul Barron. Paul, my man, are you feeling unstoppable today?
It's going to be a good one, Eric.
I'm excited. Yeah, man, it's great to see you. Past guest on the show. You're first on the show, episode 258, and we covered your book, The Chipotle Effect. So if you guys did not that episode, if you've not read that book, I mean, the book was written when, like 2010, 2011?
2010, we wrote that. Yep.
And I believe it's still a relevant book as far as it's like, I think history, like you said before the recording, history repeats itself, right? We're constantly evolving, and great book. Check out that episode. Also, I should mention, Paul is the publisher and founder of fastcasual.com and QSR.com. And you are the founder and chairman of Foodable Network. And I don't know how you do it, man. But is it safe to say you're kind of transitioning and having a new focus on the world of blockchain and NFTs? And are you shifting away from the restaurant world, or are you still managing both? What's going on?
So Rever Networks was formed last year during COVID, that essentially moved us into kind of a new area for what we were trying to focus in on, which is really a conversation around technology and how it affects so much in business in general. Obviously, food service is a big part of that, but my background, which I'll go into in a minute, that kind of ties it all together, was kind of a catalyst for this shift in requirements. So Foodable Network still is a big part of our studio. We produce, 6 different podcasts over there. The Restaurant Report, Chef AF, Fast Casual Nation is a big one. Accelerate, which is our to-go takeout and delivery podcast. And then you have Rever Networks, which has another new entity underneath it, which is just Paul Barron Network. And that is a technology, investing, and crypto focus. And we started that about, the concept came up around 3 years ago, and really started spinning that out into a product last year. It was actually January when we launched that product.
Yeah, and I will go ahead and give a plug for the Foodable Network. I mean, that's kind of one of my secrets, one of my go-tos, where I go to kind of stay at breast with what's going on, or abreast with what's going on.
Yeah,
I mean, you guys are. I mean, Paul knows his stuff, and there's a reason why I invited him to be here today. I would consider you identify as a futurist, somebody who's constantly looking to the future.
Oh yeah.
So I think we should get into it, but it is a tradition here to start every episode off with a success quote or mantra. So what do you got for us?
I think my mantra right now has been a shift, really, from, and you have to understand the background of where I came from, which was computer science. I mean, my degree is in computer science. My first job was working for Microsoft. And that's how I fell into food. I kind of explain that. But one thing that has always been on my mind is kind of the next evolution of technology that fixes things. And right now, it's kind of the theme I'm working on is blockchain fixes that problem that I think so many businesses face on a day in and day out basis. So blockchain fixes everything.
And I still don't understand how it does, but we're going to get into that. We're going to hold that. But before we get into the deep details of blockchain, why should we be listening to you? What makes you an expert on this subject? Why
Sure.
We have our ears open?
So my story started in college, really just as a geek that kind of grew up in understanding the early stages of computer science. This was back when essentially you had the 8088 processor that was starting to make its way into PCs and motherboards that essentially kind of revolutionized the use of computers. And my first job was being recruited by the FBI. And essentially my job was going to be probably at some point working on computer systems and cyber terrorism, essentially what we call cyber terrorism today. But instead, went to a job fair and ended up taking a project with Microsoft. And my goal with Microsoft was to essentially re-engineer a product, which was at that time Windows 2.0. And Windows 2.0 was in its really kind of in its early stage of development. It was right after Microsoft had essentially evolved from a DOS operating system into what now is known as Windows. And the evolution was to try to interface what Windows was trying to do with the retail sector. So they charged me with essentially creating point of sale systems for restaurants. And that was where I got involved into the restaurant industry. Spent about 5 to 6 months of the year in Asia, traveling throughout, mostly through managing developers and computer science geeks, engineers, all that kind of stuff to develop point of sale systems.
So we're going back like mid-90s, correct?
It was 1993. Yeah.
1993. What the heck was it about the restaurant industry that made you stick around for 30 years after that?
So I started consulting. So Microsoft had, we were still a growing company at the time. This is pre-internet era. Okay. And, I worked directly with Steve Ballmer, Bill Gates, saw that evolution that was really starting to happen when essentially Tim Berners-Lee put basically HTML on the map and the World Wide Web, and what we were seeing with everything from, AOL and the startups, Netscape, Napster, if you were in the music side, all that was being born literally at the time in which many of these things were happening for me. But what was the difference is Microsoft was charged by a lot of major companies, Starbucks, Panera Bread, McDonald's, Taco Bell, to essentially kind of transition to their technology stack at that era into a new wave of point of sale. And I was the lead guy. So my job was working directly with a lot of these major restaurant companies. And I just fell in love with the people, was really what drew me into it. And before you knew it, I was a tech guy that converted to a food guy. Yeah.
What was it about the people? You just hit a vein with me, because that's what I love about this industry. What draws me back to this industry is the people. Well, what is it about the people for you that just is so unique?
So, my best friends and closest friends of life have all come from the restaurant industry. And it's a different kind of passion that I can't quite put a finger on, because there's a certain challenge, and it's kind of like the warrior code. If you've ever been in battle or war or any kind of really hard, situation in life, there's people you can count on and people you can't. And one thing I have found about leaders in the restaurant industry is these guys carry this kind of unspoken warrior code. In my opinion, they're ready to take on anything. Nothing is ever too great in terms of a challenge. And at the end of the day, they kind of look back and it's not them that did it. It was the team, so to me, that kind of separated them from the pack quite a bit in terms of just one, realizing, great mentors, unbelievable men. I've been involved with. My first mentor was, you probably know him, Ron Shaik, with Panera Bread. So his break off of when Panera was really launched. Then you look at Troy Smith, the founder of Sonic Drive-In. Great stories of these two guys that kind of helped me foster my early career. One story I'll share with you. Troy Smith, founder of Sonic Drive-In, lives in Edmond, Oklahoma. Met him as he was transitioning out as the chairman of the board for Sonic at the time. We're about 600 around 1,600 units at the time, one of the largest QSR chains out there. And I was consulting for them. Patty Moore was their current CEO. She is now the chair over at Red Robin. Phil Hudson at the time was their current chairman of the board. So a lot of these guys still stick around to the industry. But the point was, Troy, I was pitching the concept of fast casual to them, of what I felt like I saw happening. And he was the guy that essentially kind of told me that I was onto something and I shouldn't quit at whatever cost. So but anyway, those are the kind of things and stories I think that really just draw in a very interesting attachment to the people in this industry.
Yeah. So if I derailed your train of thought, the original question was, why should we be listening to you? And I asked why you love people. So
Yeah.
if you want to pick up that train of thought, but I didn't want to
Yeah,
cut you.
sure. So my job at Microsoft was really to solve the tech stack solution for point of sale, and was able to do that. At one time, I had 300 developers that were working under my direction worldwide. And then I went into consulting, really spoke and worked on the technology side. And then my career kind of got sidetracked with this thing called the internet. And at that time, it was about publishing. And I was not a publisher, I wasn't a writer, I wasn't a media person, but fast casual kind of grew on me. And I started a blog at that time. They weren't called blogs, but it was an early era of what we know now, from content publishing. And that was really kind of the launch of it. And that's kind of what sidestepped me into the media business. But my underlying, love is really technology. And I think everybody knows that has ever met me,
Yeah.
is that no matter what area of the industry I was working in, tech was always the driving force for the future.
Yeah. So the original question, why should we be listening to you? The answer, the short and sweet answer, is because we got a super nerd on our hands, and he's plugged in. He's our super nerd, and I cannot wait to pull back the layers on you, man.
Yeah.
So why don't we just get like super aerial real quick and just assume that some of our listeners out there
Right.
don't know the first thing about blockchain, what cryptocurrency means, what NFTs are. Like just get into like the most basic definitions of what these things are to help us understand what we're talking about.
Sure. This is a question I get a lot because the conversation is always, why is this different? What makes it unique? And why do we need it? That's really usually the bigger question. From a cryptocurrency standpoint, a lot of people look at it just simply as a new asset class, which is in basic, in basic elements, that's what it is for investment. But the core behind those asset classes is more of what I'm interested in, which is the technology, the underlying technology that runs it. Bitcoin, of course, is kind of the OG of cryptocurrency. It's the one immutable blockchain out there that essentially has a limited supply that makes it so valuable. It's kind of, a lot of people refer to it as digital gold. It's a new asset class that could potentially rival gold at some point in terms of the total valuation.
So let's dumb it down even more, Paul. What do you mean by an asset class? I mean, this
okay,
is
so asset class: stocks, bonds, real estate, any kind of municipals. The asset classes that most people will invest in are going to be mutual funds, IRAs, stocks, bonds, real estate, businesses. Blockchain and the cryptocurrency or crypto assets have emerged really in 2017 was I feel when this really started to break out. I was tracking it all the way back in 2012 when Bitcoin really came onto the scene. I felt like it was very fascinating because of just the technology behind what blockchain represented. But I felt like it was way too early. And I had been down this road before of being way too early, and knew what kind of challenges were ahead of it. So for me, it was just monitor and observe. But as an asset class now, what has happened since 2017 is there's been a whole slew, tens of thousands of projects that are based on a variety of blockchain that is basically developed on a couple areas of code that kind of run blockchain. Solidity is one of the key platform development codes that's being used, Rust. Then you've got Haskell for different code sets that are essentially being utilized to create this technology. But Bitcoin being the OG, what essentially it's allowing people to do is invest in something that is appreciating in value. That's the core element.
In my understanding, money in its most basic form, what it is just something that we can all agree on that has value. And gold,
trust,
arguably, it's just like we all agree that this thing has value, and this is approximately what the value is. And we can assign, it made moving things around possible because there was one thing we could trade that we all agreed had value, right?
Right.
So it kind of liquefied transactions. Is that
exactly? Yep.
form of money. So this is just the most latest basic form of, we all agree this thing has value. And it's really just, like you said, it's trust. It's like the value in money and all things that we use as currency is really just a intangible, what's the word I'm looking for? Intangible. It's not, it's an agreement. It's weird how we think about it, but it's like, it's not a real thing in a sense.
Yeah, and I think with blockchain and with what crypto has done is it's really kind of opened up the eyes to a lot of people in terms of what digital assets are today, and a lot of that is being really kind of reformatted right now for a variety of industries, including food service. Food service, I feel like, is one of the sectors, along with retail, banking. And when you think back on the internet, era of the internet and its birth, restaurants were actually one of the last, areas of industry sectors that truly adopted the use case of internet, of what the internet is today. And of course, if we had only had, online e-commerce in 1996, when we were really struggling with that kind of development, and just the whole idea of trusting our credit card on a place called the internet, which was the same. I mean, the funny thing is my background in tech is 25 plus years. I'm seeing the same arguments that I saw for the internet in 1993, 94, 95 that I'm seeing today for blockchain. And, it's just one of those interesting things. I've seen this movie before.
Yeah, and maybe we can get into what some of those arguments are, but real quick, some basic definitions. An NFT stands for a non-interchangeable unit of
non-fungible,
data.
Non-fungible.
Fungible.
Yep.
I wrote that, but for some reason it must have autocorrected me. Yeah, that's weird. Thank you.
Yep.
Non-fungible unit. So that's like the type of currency, and then blockchain is the digital ledger. So what are the difference? Like, because I feel like people you're change these words. So like, what are the?
So a non-fungible token is simply a utility inside what blockchain utilizes, and it essentially enables you to create an asset for any kind of use case. It could be, a non-fungible token could be an in real life ticket to your podcast live show. You could create an NFT for that. And the only reason that it's unique and different is because with an NFT, they're designed to be immutable, unchangeable. That's the key thing that really makes it secure. And it's also why people are utilizing it for art, digital assets, and collectibles. We'll see the comic industry moving in this direction. If you look at what is happening with Vivi and Disney, which is a huge digital collection now of mainly Disney characters that are being launched as NFTs within these apps. So the comic book collector of yesterday is the NFT collector of tomorrow. But that's not where it stops. The NFT can go way deep into the business ecosystem in ways that I'm not sure everyone completely understands yet. And it's okay, because most people, when I sit down and talk with them about what crypto means to business in general, a lot of times when they walk out, it's kind of like when you walked out of a meeting in the early or late 2000s or 1990s and realized that we were about to see an unbelievable shift in business because of technology, mainly the web. And I think that's what we're dealing with right now. It's literally a gold rush that's happening in front of our eyes.
Yeah. So the other thing that I kind of wanted to probe you on is this idea that it's decentralized. So it's fixed, meaning it can't change. Like if you only create 100 type of a blockchain or NFT, there'll always be 100, and the value of that's changing over time, right? The other side of this is that it's decentralized. What's the significance of it being?
Yeah. So decentralization is probably one of the core elements that is the backbreaker of the problem of technology today. So what we're dealing with our current Web 2.0 tech stack is, and a lot of people don't understand this, but when you really break it down and understand what kind of exploits and cyber terrorism that is occurring within Web 2.0, a lot of people would be surprised. You probably recognize these things as when your credit card gets hacked and it's being utilized at Home Depot and those kind of things. That's what a real world case scenario is. But for the common person, those are the kind of things that would completely be eliminated with decentralized technology. The other problem that it faces is with most technology, almost everything is hackable. So nothing is secure. It doesn't matter if you're in the NSA, if you're a bank down the street, or if you're an institution like McDonald's that gets their loyalty rewards hacked for their Monopoly game. Doesn't matter if it's a target based on value, it's a target for a hacker. So the problem is centralization with all of those kinds of systems, everything from your credit card processing system, your contacts, your real estate, anything that you're centralizing is now a target. Decentralization becomes a problem for hackers because there is no one home place. And that creates a much more secure layer. In essence, the blockchain could be the one thing that would completely eliminate fraud. Now, there will always be scams, but those are going to come with the early stages of any kind of early stage markets that are being developed, such as the internet was always looked at in 1996 and 97 as if you're on the internet, you're a scammer or you're a criminal. When I was working in that phase of developing basically websites and starting to really move in that position, my mother even asked me, what is this internet thing? It's a fad. Why are you wasting all this time? You should be working for the FBI, those kind of things. And I'm like, honey, Mom, this is going to change the planet. We're talking about something big here.
Yeah. Well, good foresight. And I think the other thing that came to my mind is this idea that it's open. So when you're thinking centralization, you're also thinking banks, right?
Yep.
So when you open it up, you also take the middleman out, which
yes.
So what's the significance of that element?
Yeah. So you hit on something right there that probably is the number one issue with blockchain, mostly from a regulatory standpoint, a government standpoint, and even a business standpoint to a certain extent, is that with blockchain, it has the potential to essentially leapfrog the financial system. If you were to just say on the financial side of things, let's forget about the other utility aspects of what blockchain will mean in the future. But an example would be you're a restaurant, you decide to take, Ethereum as payment. You no longer need a bank to process that payment. You're no longer processing a merchant fee with your credit card. Instead, you have a wallet that's attached to your website, which someone who also has Ethereum, when they go there, they're not putting in a credit card. They're putting a direct link into their own wallet that holds that Ethereum. Ethereum now becomes currency because you've just purchased a burrito with Ethereum. We're going to see more and more of that implementation. I mean, you've seen Mark Cuban put Doge on the acceptance layer of how they're accepting, payment for gear and things of that nature, among many other major companies that are now accepting cryptocurrency. Just to give you an example of our own business, 50% of our revenue for half of our entire business is done in crypto. And wow. 2 years ago, I would have looked at that and said, this will never happen. The transition can never come. When Coinbase went public this year, it really kind of created a new era, I think, in people understanding of what cryptocurrency is. But now, we have businesses, vendors that are asking to be paid in cryptocurrency. And it's a variety of, whether it's USDC, or it's maybe another stable coin like Tether, or maybe it's a tradable asset like Bitcoin or Ethereum, Solana, Cardano. I mean, there's 100 different major tier one classes in that area.
I mean, how many different types of Bitcoin will there be before that? It just by constantly inventing new Bitcoins, we're just diluting the process and taking the value.
I don't know if you think about how many currencies are there in the world right now. I mean, you've got 126 different currencies. You've got countries that are utilizing now Bitcoin as a legal tender, whether it's El Salvador and what they've done in their country. What we'll see eventually is a digital dollar, both from a G7, I think, or a G8 country that eventually will go to a US DC, which is a US centralized digital currency. And when we see something like that, a digital currency starting to go into a major country to replace and or augment their current fiat system, then at that point, blockchain has arrived, and the shift will occur. It's going to be 2001.
Yeah.
And if you think about the dot bomb in 1999, gosh, I don't know. I was in Silicon Valley at the time. There were tens of thousands of startups that were just invading the internet with every kind of e-commerce, scam you could imagine. Webvan, Peapod, let's just say in the food side. Then you went into all sorts, because essentially what you had at that time was e-commerce became kind of sentient. And we had the launch. And of course, at that time, that was when the dot bomb hit, and we lost 1.7 trillion in overall assets in about 18 months across about 200 companies in Silicon Valley. And it almost destroyed that industry. But instead, what happened was something very interesting. And that was that the birth of all the billionaires that you see walking around the planet today, Elon Musk, Peter Thiel, Jeff Bezos, Mark Benioff, all those guys were born in 2000 at the death of what was all the froth. Also, out of that rose the phoenix, and that was a lot of these companies that became monsters, including guys like Jack Dorsey and Ev, who were essentially beginning the startup of what would eventually be known as Twitter, with their project called Odeo. Same thing with Zuckerberg while he was at Harvard and MIT. Those guys were all building in the same framework of post 2000. So that's essentially what we're looking at right now.
So reading an article over at qsrmagazine.com, one of the things I picked up on is this idea that with Bitcoin, everything is quote unquote opens up. And the example they're talking about in this article is that, like, you can now use Bitcoin for loyalty programs, for example.
Yep.
Say if you have 5 concepts, you buy a burger at one concept, and then you can build loyalty. You can use that loyalty to go buy a salad at another concept, and within that restaurant group, things become interchangeable. So in other words, they say that it opens things up, but really, what does it mean by how Bitcoin opens things up?
So the blockchain is very interesting, because when Satoshi created the blockchain concept, the idea was fully open code base and a fully open chain in which it doesn't know that it's Eric or Paul, but it knows that that particular wallet has a certain number of transactions, of which I can see on every one out there. If you go to a website called Whale Watch, you can look at the most rich wallets in the world transacting in Bitcoin and many digital assets on a day in, day out basis, every minute of the day. But what blockchain does is it opens up all of that to, which, can you imagine, if you think about it this way, can you imagine if your bank account was wide open to the world?
Yeah,
in other words, it could see every transaction that's happening. Now, it doesn't know that it went to, to buy a Chipotle burrito, or it went to invest in, an online service. Doesn't matter. It just says, okay, $32 was spent on that in that wallet at this time. It was transacted and settled all in the blockchain, and anybody can look at it. Now, there are some arguments in this for security, because when you think about security, the blockchain is tremendously secure, but it's also tremendously open. And decentralization also is another scenario that could be very interesting, because at some point we could see government agencies that could essentially understand a lot more about people's finances. And that's the reason that a digital currency or a central bank digital currency could become the holy grail for governments to be able to track people and how they spend their money. Now, if you get to a CBDC level, Now we're getting into very dystopian potentials. But I think what we'll see before that is more openness around variety of chains and assets, whether it's Bitcoin or Ethereum or any of those things. I know I'm getting into to where it starts to go very deep, but the point is that the opportunities right now are immense.
What do you mean by dystopian potential?
Well, I mean, okay, let's just say bad actors. Let's use Russia, for example. We already have some countries that have, or China. Let's use anyone that controls their population to a certain extent. If you go to a central bank digital currency in Russia, which Russia right now is exploring, now every digital wallet is tied to that bank. And if Russia decides, listen, this guy is not a good Russian citizen, we need to control his access to funds. A central bank digital currency essentially eliminates the need for banks, regional banks, national banks, Chase Manhattan, doesn't matter. All that would be eliminated and
So
be
a
sucked up into
centralized form eliminates banks, but doesn't also a decentralized form?
only. Well, you see, what you're talking about is two variables here. One is a centralized currency, a CBDC, a digital dollar, a digital ruble, whatever it might be, or the alternative, Bitcoin, Ethereum, other digital assets. Now, those are the ones that probably threaten the sovereignty of nations more so than anything, because of the fact that people can trade upon them for goods and services without the need for a fiat system.
Yeah.
That becomes a problem for governments. So I think we're going to see at some point regulatory scenarios that will see the two sides at some point start to merge. Now, digital assets, just like a piece of real estate or a stock or a bond, when you sell those, you're going to get taxed. It's the same thing with crypto. It's the same thing with any digital asset or an NFT. If you own a comic book that's worth, $100,000 because it's a first edition Spider-Man, or you own that same comic book in an NFT in a Vivi app, also worth $100,000. If you sell it, that's income to you. So now it's even more traceable in the blockchain. I think the IRS actually is going to love this because they're going to have immutable records and yeah, immutable records that are completely open. But at the same time, it also creates for a very interesting and more creative person in terms of tax loopholes, things of that nature.
In one way, I want to give my good friend Peter Lazar a shout out here, because we had a very long conversation when I was in Tampa, Florida. He was driving me around, introducing me to some of the restaurateurs out there. Huge geek when it comes to blockchain. And the way he was explaining it to me, which I think I absorbed correctly, is this idea that it just liquefies the world. So
it does.
Yeah. Anything that you have that is an asset, you can instantly, if you're trying to get money for to open a restaurant, anything that you have that is of an asset of value, you can
tokenize.
You can instantly tokenize, liquefy it, and get trade value, trade like to get whatever you need to open your restaurant, for example. And it's instantaneous.
Yeah, it's kind of like crowdfunding to a certain extent. I think we'll see some SEC regulation that is already at at the door of the beast right now, and that, of course, is the SEC and their case against Ripple, which is essentially will be the landmark case against blockchain. If the SEC wins against Ripple that it was a security, then the likelihood of a lot of these assets will be certified as securities, which requires a lot more KYC, know your customer connections and requirements, which is a typical investment class that you see across anything. That I actually invite. I think that is something that's needed. The problem that I see with the SEC is that right now there's about 10,000 different crypto projects out there. And there's probably going to be in the next 5 years, 20,000 to 50,000 of those crypto projects worldwide. The biggest issue that I see right now with government regulatory issues that could approach is stifling innovation. And what I mean by that is if you look back, and when I was working with Microsoft in the 90s, we got in trouble because we essentially started requiring the computer builders to use our operating system for IE Explorer. That essentially was starting to isolate the browser to where you can only use Internet Explorer on Dell machines, et cetera. So we got in trouble for that for antitrust. Microsoft took it on the chin, paid a big fine, not much compared to today's standards, recovered from that. Microsoft, of course, is now on an open system. Right now, the problem with blockchain is that the world around us is building on it. The United States, it's still somewhat illegal to be involved in any of these kinds of startups and innovations because you're a US citizen. That's a problem because it enables really new technology centers to be born. In other words, you wouldn't have a Silicon Valley if that had been the case with the early days of the internet. If we had put that kind of restriction on investors and on the evolution of the investment class, none of what we know in Silicon Valley, and us being the United States, probably being the number one power in terms of internet technology companies, that may not be the case in blockchain. We may have actually already lost our position.
Well, that's not good.
No, it's not. That's why I'm on this show today, Eric. I'm trying to spread the word.
Again, a little shout out to my friend, Peter Lazar, who kind of helped me put together this list of where I'm calling them intersections, points where blockchain kind of intercept the world of restaurants. And what I have written down: real estate finance, loyalty, supply chain or food tracing, payments, branding, metaverse, and then you mentioned also HR and culinary aspects. So we're going to just kind of go through. So this is a list: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 intersection points. Hopefully pretty, I don't know, quickly, but not too, I'm going to try to stay on track. It's going to be a challenge. But let's start with just real estate. Actually, I think there was one thing I wanted to talk about, and I don't know if this is an intersection or just more generally, but how does this affect the user experience?
Well, in terms of retail user experience or digital user experience?
I mean, I guess it's one and the same now because it's all, or is it not? I don't see, I really don't understand.
Well, if you walk into a restaurant, the user experience is going to have unique aspects from a technology standpoint. There should not be a point of sale system in the store anymore in 5 years. I know the POS guys would hate to hear that, but essentially all of that should disappear. Everything should be in the cloud. All things should be mobile. That in itself will have, huge ramifications, not only on technology, but also just in unit build outs. The other aspect I think we'll see in terms of, especially around blockchain, is starting to see source supply, things of that nature that start to play into it, where, literally with a scan of a QR code, you'd have, a complete provenance of everything in terms of ingredients. If you're a vegan, if you're, a person that is really into certain kinds of meats, all those kind of things can be tied into blockchain traceability. So traceability gets to be very interesting. The removal of technology, loyalty systems, online ordering, remote ordering, all those things will be impacted by blockchain within the next 5 years.
Okay, so on the retail side, no more POS system. On the digital side,
on the digital side, wow. But okay, now you start rolling into probably a Ready Player One kind of environment. Yeah, and because with real estate, the potential for digital assets to be built in the metaverse. Think of it as your website that you've spent so much money building for the last decade, putting in e-commerce, loyalty systems, mapping, geo-targeting, trace backs, backlink systems that trace every use case scenario of a user that enters your website. All of that could be in the metaverse, which essentially is the next internet. It's Web3. And within that, you'll have potential virtual experiences, but in the early stages, it'll be 2D. So just mobile visual experience like what you and I are doing right now. It's a 2D experience, but that will eventually change at some point. Now, obviously, Facebook, aka Meta, they're trying to go in that direction. I still feel that, I have strong opinions about that's still a closed garden, and that the openness of the blockchain will probably eliminate that. But if you think about the metaverse, let's just use Chipotle as an example. Number one digital, I would say one of the number one digital brands out there in terms of success, their ability to transition during the pandemic to a lot more takeaway and digital services. Probably now, I would think close to 40% of their sales being digital. Imagine that being in a whole new environment within a metaverse for an experience. So instead of you just going onto your app and building your burrito, you might be seeing this burrito virtually built, which is kind of interesting. That may increase upsell and may increase more premium ingredient opportunities that could be added to that order that
So
you
when you say
typically
virtually built, are you saying I have my goggles on and I'm seeing that?
let's just say that's an AR component inside your mobile app, which is already being done today with some of Apple's new code sets that enable, AR, augmented reality. So the likelihood of that potentially being real is going to be something. The other aspect of this is because there's going to be so much draw to the metaverse, which is Web3, the new internet, that eventually that's where all the cool kids will be, just like the early days of the internet. It's where all of the main influencers will be. And it's where all of the entertainment will start to go, which is going to be gaming, music, etc. Because of that, it draws in all the brands. So whether you're Givenchy or you're Gap or you're Chipotle, it doesn't really matter. The idea is that you're trying to get out and be relevant and be in front of the trends. No different than what happened in 2007 when social media started and everybody looked around and said, do we need a Facebook page? What's a Twitter account? Those are the kind of decisions that are happening in boardrooms today with restaurants going, do we need to really consider Sandbox? Maybe we should look at Decentraland. Or is there a new metaverse that is being built out there that we should be a startup with and building on? The likelihood of branding is going to be the first big gold rush for it. And next will be loyalty, and then will be utility.
Okay. So I feel like it's a lot to take in. I have some other questions I'm going to save to the end, but so
yeah,
we kind of talked about the user experience, and you're touching on some of the things I was hoping to go deeper into. Again, the talking points I have in front of me: real estate, loyalty, supply chain, payments, branding, metaverse, which you already got into a little bit, HR, and culinary aspects. Starting with the top, real estate finance. How is this going to really affect the restaurant industry in terms of real estate finance?
Yeah, tokenization is going to be key with crowdfunding. Today, it's a pretty typical model. Now, companies and individuals have the ability to do some crowdfunding out there right now with a lot of the investor laws that were updated. You don't have to have as much accredited investors involved. There's some regulatory requirements that I think we'll probably start to see that will evolve just because of what we'll see in blockchain in general. If you think about the Constitution DAO that just recently tried to buy, the Constitution, an actual certified copy of the Constitution, they raised a lot of money, but they were, unsuccessful in obtaining the asset. So that could be, and that was a tokenized model. We're seeing this in fine art, where fine art is being purchased, held, and then people can buy tokens, which is a portion of that asset. So imagine if your community, you're a restaurant, let's say you're a chef in Cincinnati, you have a big following, you have a couple of restaurants, you want to open your third restaurant, and you go to the bank. The bank says, hey, you're a little over leveraged, probably not a good idea for you to take out another loan. But instead, what you do is you tokenize certain aspects of your business to raise funds. And within that, you start to create a whole environment of new digital value for your brand. So you've been building your digital brand for the past decade. Maybe you're a renowned chef. At some point, your recipes, your videos, your podcasts, your content, maybe your ingredient design. At some point, maybe you're talking about building a product to go to Whole Foods or something of that nature. All of that could become tokenized and built on an investment class that could be created into raising funds. That's usually done through an NFT or through some sort of tokenized aspect. So let's say you just wanted to buy a piece of real estate, and you said, I'm going to buy the real estate, but I'm going to tokenize it, and we're going to launch it as a DAO, a decentralized autonomous organization. And that DAO essentially is the group, the management is going to own that piece of real estate, in which I will be a part of that. This is where it gets really complicated in the sense of how contracts and in real world environments will be created in the future. The likelihood is we'll see a lot more crowdfunding. And I think the investors, or I should say the VCs, are probably more concerned about this than anything, because it removes the need for venture capital at the large layer. It's why a lot of these projects are launching now on these things called launch pads. And it's the same thing. I see restaurants of the future launching on launch pads instead of just technology. I got a new idea for a brand. I want to launch it on a launch pad. The launch pad could be a company like ours that says, hey, listen, we have a big reach and we can tokenize that brand and raise capital for you through thousands of investors. Now, that's the problem that we have in the United States, is because that's not legal here in the US. Outside the US, no SEC requirements. Now, if the SEC at some point says, hey, we're going to make this something that is regulated, but it's just like a Series D or a Reg D. If you're raising up to $1 million, you just file a Reg D with the SEC, and that would be the way you would do it. But it's through a crowd-funded, decentralized approach toward obtaining that capital. And then you just, it's a matter of creating that as a investment class, and boom, you got a wallet, and there's your money for your brand to start, and you have 1,000 investors.
So simply put, you're able to liquefy all of your assets. And
yes.
That's, I mean, you dropped a lot on us. I'm trying to keep up, but for the sake of trying not to get too lost, I think we can move on. Unless there's anything else you want to say in terms of how this is going to affect the real estate world. Did we miss anything?
No, I think real estate is just another aspect of companies that are going to start tokenizing real estate, in the sense that more people can own it or can assist in the ownership of it. It doesn't have to be you by yourself to say.
Yeah, the thing that gets me excited about this is I think that it is kind of it's a kind of an equalizer. It's a, do you see this being good for the middle class? Is this going to like
big time?
Yeah,
big time for the middle class.
That's what
because
I'm feeling.
Right now the investment opportunity for the average Joe has never been there, and they're getting a shot now to buy into this early tech. Imagine if you could have bought in pre-IPO to Amazon. That's essentially what a lot of blockchain and crypto investors are getting the chance to do today. So it's making a lot of millionaires. It's making some billionaires. And the cool thing is it's really opening up the eyes of a lot of innovators and creators, to kind of go to that next level.
Yeah, you got me interested in that. Being a creator, I'm like, well, where can I get in on this? But maybe it's a conversation for another day off the recording. So loyalty is the next bullet point I have here.
Yep.
We talked a little bit about loyalty, but kind of really break that down and distill that.
Yeah, just loyalty is probably the easiest, because if you do enter into, whether it's a payment system or just a loyalty system that's using blockchain as the traceability of it, the advantage that this has is being an open network, the potential for first, open development in terms of the software required to develop a loyalty platform. You no longer have to utilize the traditional rails that are out there for loyalty systems. There's probably, I'd say, 15 different loyalty companies in the US right now for restaurants. Okay. If this were to evolve, any good major chain worth their salt that has any kind of tech dev in their roster, that are their IT team, the likelihood is they could build their own loyalty system on blockchain. They would not need, if they could ever get mass adoption with it, it would completely eliminate the loyalty-based companies. So I do see a lot of loyalty companies starting to transition and offering blockchain as one of the tools to track it. But because I'm blockchain, let's say, for instance, that, I sign up with, I won't use any names, but I'll sign up with a major loyalty company that's out there. And they make an option for me to basically attach my MetaMask wallet to my profile on that loyalty account. Because it's done that, now I have all my access to all my transactions on the blockchain within my MetaMask account. I'm using MetaMask as my wallet. It might be a trust wallet, could be all kinds of various wallets within crypto that I could utilize, that traces back all of my recorded purchases for any brand, cross-brand, multi-chain. all within one wallet, all within one decentralized place. So it gets really intriguing around what loyalty is going to look like in the next 4 or 5 years. If the loyalty companies that are out there right now are not already thinking about going in this direction, this will be a big whiff for the restaurant industry, because it's going to be huge for that potential.
Give me one resource, one company, one, like if I'm a restaurateur and I want to take advantage of this specifically relative to loyalty, give me a place to start.
Well, there's no loyalty programs out there that have implemented blockchain yet. I've heard, and I won't say names, but there's been a handful that have inquired even to us, what is kind of the next step for us to take and look at loyalty implementation around blockchain. So I think they're starting to entertain it, but to my knowledge, nobody's done it just yet. We are that early.
So the resources, pay attention to revernetwork.com, and as soon as there is information, you'll be the first to know. So
yeah. I mean, if you look at what Gary Vee is doing with NFTing his restaurants in New York, that's just to me, when I look at that model, it's advanced, but in reality,
fish concept. What's the name of the restaurant? I think it's a fish concept, I want to say.
Yeah, there's a couple that he's launched, but he's built basically an NFT model for a reservation that's a standing reservation, which again is just another way to raise capital on future reservations. Which, could you ever imagine raising capital on future reservations?
I don't even want to around that. I mean, but that's a thing. But you know what? Here's the thing. At the same time, like, a reservation holds value, and that's one thing the restaurant industry has been super guilty of. Is we don't value our assets. A reservation I think UC Talk doing a really great job of recognizing this and trying to do something about it. A reservation on a Friday night has more value than a reservation on Tuesday for lunch, and I think. And we should be leveraging our assets, and we don't do a good job at that. So tools like this, like crypto or Bitcoin or NFT, like, enable us to instantaneously leverage our assets to the fullest potential. And that's the kind of stuff that excites me.
Yeah, here would be a good resource is, let's say, for a restaurant that had a little bit of knowledge around tech and was forward leaning enough, they could launch an NFT project for their restaurant. Let's just use Michael's Genuine here in Miami. If Chef Michael Schwartz says, okay, listen, Paul, we want to launch an NFT for all of our Michael's Schwartz restaurants here in Miami. The NFT is going to be Friday night, 7:30 reservations. And I've got 10 for each restaurant. I'm going to basically create an NFT ticket that I'll launch on OpenSea, which is where I'll be able to actually layer in a smart contract, build the little digital asset, and that NFT now becomes something that I can sell, and it becomes auctionable. Here's the cool part, is now it becomes potentially tradable between guests. So let's say I own the NFT today, and I have a buddy of mine that's coming in town and says, listen, I need a 7:00 Friday night, and I want to go to MGD. I'm like, no problem. Let me send you my NFT, which is my reservation that I paid $1,000 for, that I own.
$2,000 because you want to go too. And how bad on it? Yeah.
So, or if I sell it. So the value, here's the beautiful thing about NFTs is that they can put a traceable creator tax, or not tax, but residual upon it. So up to 10% of that sale. Let's say I sell that NFT to Pitbull and I sell it for $50,000 because it is become a hot restaurant all of a sudden, and it's kind of come out of nowhere, and it's a new chef, and everybody wants a reservation. This happens in New York all the time with Mark Forgione when he first came up. I mean, if you look at all of those guys, how they were bust onto the scene. Now that NFT, that reservations were 10 grand for the high rollers. Okay. And if a restaurant is smart, they're building utility around these NFTs. So if you buy this NFT, you're going to get a chef's table. You're going to get a SOM selection of one of our 2 best wines that we've brought in that's only accessible for VIP. You're also going to get X, Y, and Z. Then you're going to get additional loyalty components. So you could start to see how this all ties in
Yeah.
to value proposition.
So here's another place where I see this being relative. So I think a big part of the future of the restaurant industry is going to be memberships, right?
Yes.
So,
Bingo.
okay. So I'm a restaurateur who's a hot deal in town, right? Everybody
Yep.
wants my restaurant.
NFT membership.
I operate off of a membership model where I can only really, I have the bandwidth to have 100 members in my network.
Yep.
The more popular I get, the more valuable that NFT becomes. And I can have 100 members that are my guests that I take care of. They're my people. And one membership could be theoretically $30,000 a year.
Yeah, and you're also gaining residual value for every time that token,
and it can increase in value the more high demand you become. And I think this is the kind of stuff that this is how I see it being like valuable.
Well, and as you build it, you can start to really implement new utility into the NFTs. So let's say you layered in, a gold NFT, a platinum NFT, a silver NFT layer. And on the platinum layer right now, it has 1, 2, 3 utility. Sure, you get the reservation, you get some other assets. But let's say now the restaurant's doing great and you want to do an airdrop to all your platinum NFT holders to do, a private cruise here in the Biscayne Bay. And only platinum holders can get access to that. Now that becomes a marketing engine. So your platinum holder NFTs now just went up in value immediately. People are going to start trading that and start requesting it. So getting access to it. So people that have it listed on OpenSea are going to get offers for that NFT, that ticket, that membership, whatever you want to call it, that essentially starts to create more value within the restaurant itself. So loyalty could also be plugged into that with general membership. So it's no different now. Instead of 100 NFTs, you have 100,000 that are available. And because you have one of those NFTs that you got for $4 from Starbucks, now you get one free coffee a month or whatever it might be that has created a loyalty component. And if you do tie payment into it, that's where it gets very intriguing and very interesting for a restaurant brand. And I think what we'll see in maybe the next 2 to 3 years is the creativity level. We are just literally at the genesis of what is happening right now. That's the beauty of it is, and I could tell people about this all the time. I say, hey, it's 1999 all over again.
Yeah. And that's when the internet started to take off for the reference.
Yeah.
So we're kind of jumping around. I think we kind of touched on payment just a little bit there. Safe to say, we unpackaged loyalty pretty well. Reservations, I could think that kind of ties into payment. What about supply chain and food tracing? Have we touched on it? We mentioned a few times, but have we crystallized that yet?
Well, I think blockchain, just because of its traceability nature, is a natural for supply chain provenance. And especially because of its open nature, you're going to have the ability to know where sourcing is done from. There's no, the likelihood of fraud is almost impossible, if not impossible. And as opposed to what you do see in a lot of fraud right now in seafood, you see fraud in, high quality meats, whether it's a Wagyu or something of that nature in terms of premium cuts. All of those kind of things could be eliminated pretty easily for chefs and for operators, but also for consumers, because that can start to roll down into apps that would have blockchain connectivity that would show provenance of wine, certain cuts of beef, certain species of fish, whether or not it's farmed or wild caught. All those kind of things could be eliminated with blockchain technology.
Yeah, I see this being big in the direction the industry is going with, as far as just the conscious capitalism and people being really intentional with their dollar. Like now they know. I only want to, I have confidence in knowing I'm supporting the right thing because there's so much trackability and we can support the right brands. And I think that's
right.
Good. Yeah. Okay.
Very much so.
Branding. What do we mean by branding and how this affects branding? Get into that.
Yeah. So the metaverse is probably going to be the most, I would actually say this is the biggest opportunity since launching a website for a brand. it's like launching a website for your restaurant for the very first time, but you're doing it in a new space that is known as Web3. Today, that might be, let me go build a voxel community on Sandbox next to Snoop Dogg. And because of just my awareness of people going in there, they're going to see my brand. And all it has
community. What is Sandbox? Just to make sure.
All right. So Sandbox is essentially a metaverse game.
Got it.
Snoop Dogg did a deal with Sandbox to essentially build virtual land, his estate inside this game. Now, this is a game that think of it as a Ready Player One, and all of those assets inside Ready Player One are exchangeable in real world as well as in the virtual world. So whatever you collect in the real world, you might be building up assets or tokens for Starbucks.
It's like a mirror almost. Like the things you have in the real world, you can mirror in this digital world. And
absolutely, sure. Yeah, it's just another component of, think of it as today, your bank account is completely digital. You don't really have dollars in there. You just have a number that's in your app. And that's kind of, think of that in a way for metaverse, in the sense of whether you're doing some sort of digital asset creation, or
the interface.
You're trying to get to a digital asset, such as maybe some kind of cool loyalty program with Starbucks or with any brand that's out there, but you've got to create certain elements in the gameplay that would allow you to do that. So what's happening with Sandbox, which is one of probably the most innovative metaverse plays out there. It's a project by Animoca Brands, which is a company that is investing a ton into this space. But Sandbox has done partnerships with Warner Music, which they're going to be doing music experiences in there. We'll see more and more brands start to flow into that. And eventually, I think artists will start to move into this space as well in a big way. You've already got Tom Brady doing his own NFTs. You've got Drew Brees. A lot of the sports figures have started to figure, hey, this is a new way to leverage, additional capital. So
yeah,
good stuff.
It's interesting. So for a brand, it's basically just a way for when you again, back to this idea of branding, it's a way to, I don't even know if I can find the words to explain it, but
it really is no different. I think you have to look back in about 2004 or 2005. Everybody was building on websites. They barely had e-commerce. Okay. And then social media came. And everybody looked at social media and said the exact same thing. Why do I need this? What's the purpose of having a Facebook page? What's the purpose of having a Twitter account? This is essentially what we're dealing with right now in the transition to Web3, is what's the purpose? And the purpose is, if you're going to be relevant and you're going to be where the masses are eventually, then this will be the early stage. So right now it is truly the gold rush. Imagine if you could have got the first four-letter Twitter Eric on Twitter.
Yeah, I'm getting it. So I think the most simplest way to put this, like, your brand is literally wherever it's wherever your images, your colors, your logos exist.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
So just like your brand can stay just on the sign in front of your restaurant, you can then put it on a t-shirt, and now your brand exists on that t-shirt. And the next wave was the internet. Now you can put your brand on the internet, and when you digitize something, the sky's the limit. And that's what the internet did for the brands. Your brand could stretch to Tokyo if you lived in Boston, right? It's limitless. And now this is the 3.0 for branding, where you can now put your brand on this, just like you're putting your brand on a t-shirt, you're putting your brand on the metaverse. So you have more reach, and what you can do with that brand, again, now is it's like a paradigm shift.
Yeah. Imagine that if you had a website today, let's just think in Web 2 terms, because that's what everybody is in today. If you had a website that collected every visitor's information, knew every visitor's transaction history, every visitor's speed of transactions in food, how many meals a week they had been eating, and then every visitor on your website could also engage with your brand in other ways, merch, What other ways could they, let's buy recipes, let's buy additional
Intellectual property. Yeah.
additional services, all those kind of things that, but you, in most cases, you don't have any of that today on Web 2.
Or access to a community.
Okay, perfect. So they visit to the website. All they see is their environment because they're a one-to-one connection in a website. They don't see the 80 other people that are in there placing an order at that same time on your e-commerce system. In the metaverse, all of that is revealed. So essentially, you know how many people are at that space. It's kind of like a good restaurant in New York. You walk down the street, you see a line out the door. Something's up, right? Something's up with that restaurant. So imagine that in the metaverse. But if you do it in e-commerce, you don't know that there's a line out the street. You don't know that there's a line for food today at that restaurant at that lunch hour because you're doing it all virtually in an app. So all you see is a one-to-one experience. The metaverse fixes that. It gives you now a completely three-dimensional experience that's completely different than what we will know in the future. It really is, at some point, will be a Ready Player One type environment. I do believe that we're going to see that. It's going to happen.
I'm still sitting on my question that I wrote earlier, and it's tied to this. But there's two elements on the list of things I wanted to cover that we haven't tapped into yet. I don't think HR in culinary aspects. But real quick, one more quick break to thank our sponsor. We'll be back to unpackage HR and culinary aspects, and we're going to try to wrap those up quick so we can take some questions and have some dialogue. You ready to go again?
Good to go.
All right. We're back, and let's get into it. HR and culinary aspects. Let's start with HR. How is blockchain going to affect HR? Human resources.
All right. So blockchain is going to affect HR in the same way that LinkedIn affected HR, is traceability, certification, and community. It'll essentially be the same thing in the same way. So imagine if you had a solution in HR today that tied in all your LinkedIn profiles, all your social media profiles, all your financial profiles, all in one place. And the ability for
buying you yourself as an asset.
Yes, you are the asset now. So now you, because of your quality level, your CV, and your performance history, you should be worth more. At the same time, a company wants you and should want you more than the next person. So the opportunity there within blockchain and within the metaverse start to become real because it gives you a new three-dimensional aspect of a person.
Yeah.
And also of a company. So think of it from the aspect of, if you're searching for, listen, I want the most tech forward Gen Zs or millennials that are out there to work for me, and I'm a new restaurant operator and I need that kind of level of people to advance up in my ranks, where am I going to go look for that? You know, I can go look on Twitter, I can go look on TikTok, I can try to find somebody on LinkedIn in certain ways. But if that exists in metaverse, then it's a new treasure trove of early adopters, tech forward thinkers, and people that are essentially challenging the status quo, which might be a perfect, checklist for the kind of people you want.
Yeah.
So it kind of opens up a really cool, interesting spot.
In the way that I'm thinking about this, just as a reservation increases in value with demand, also now if you have multiple companies looking at you and jockeying for you, all of a sudden your value goes up.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Yep. Can we wrap up HR?
Well, I think that's the component. It builds you an asset, or it builds you, if you're an employee, as a digital asset to a brand. And at some point, we'll start to see scenarios where HR recruiting, HR provenance, meaning, to what level you were able to climb in a certain restaurant or organization, all of that gets revealed in a unique and different way. And people would be able to essentially kind of really understand your entire CV, other than it being just on a piece of paper or in a LinkedIn profile. So I think there's going to be a lot of innovation in how HR starts to interface with this. Right now, HR is really kind of innovating in areas like LinkedIn, getting more involved in really understanding how to connect with the right kind of people in LinkedIn. I think LinkedIn most likely, if they're smart, we'll probably see them jump to the metaverse within the next 5 years, and you'll have a profile in the metaverse via LinkedIn.
It's wild.
So it's just a matter of time before we'll start to see that transition.
Yeah. Okay. Culinary aspect. How is the metaverse, or not the metaverse, blockchain NFTs going to affect the culinary aspect?
So to me, this is probably one of the most intriguing aspects of food service, because the problem that most chefs and brands have is securing a recipe. You make a dish, the chef down the street can copy it if he comes in and has dinner at your restaurant. So imagine if you could create a blockchain origin NFT around a dish that starts to create provenance for your culinary creation. And maybe you're Frankie up at, I can't remember the place in Toronto that, but he creates these pieces of art that essentially are drinks.
What do you mean by provenance? Creates a provenance. What do you mean?
So it's like having the fake dish or the real dish. Okay. You have the real,
The origin.
Yeah, you have the real Wolfgang Puck, or you have the knockoff Wolfgang Puck. All right. So the provenance of the real Wolfgang Puck's recipe, I think, and or culinary creation is going to be of value. And I think that will be something that will start to become very interesting, especially in areas where chefs are starting to share their recipes with the world, like Food Network, all these companies that essentially are doing that. Today, they're doing it via content. Imagine if you could start doing that via a blockchain signature or an NFT.
With content, I was the first one to share this. I was the first one to document it. But with NFTs, the documentation's automatic because of the tracing capabilities. So you can say, okay, got it. I'm following.
And the origination of it. So let's say that Wolfgang Puck says, "Listen, I'm going to create a new dish today, and I'm going to create 100 NFTs of this recipe." And that dish now becomes a piece of art. Instead of just a dish that everybody gets to share, it now becomes a true piece of art. And in my opinion, culinary is that. In many cases, it's coming from creators' minds. They've worked, decades to understand the nuances of flavors and ingredients and spice and all these things, that essentially when they serve it to you, it's like a piece of art if it's done right.
Okay. See, I'm interested in this for what I do, because I feel like one of the cool things about what I get to do with Restaurant Unstoppable is I really try to let the community of restaurateurs dictate who I talk to, which is why I ask all my guests, who do you respect and admire and believe should be made an example of? So now I can digitize the moment in time I took that person who hasn't been discovered and shared their story, brought them to the mainstream, and that can be art.
Yes. Yeah.
How do I get that essence of a conversation, of a story being told, and how do I put tokens to that?
Oh, that's so easy. That's like, rowing a boat easy.
I'll be my mentor. Help me out. We have rapport. Come on.
So I would give this to any chef or any brand operator. Let's say it's a brand new brand that's trying to create something, and they just create an NFT on OpenSea. Look, for your case, it's an audio file, or maybe it's a video clip of that interview that you create on OpenSea. You create as an NFT. You tie a smart contract to it, and then you put it up on Eric's NFT on OpenSea store. Think of it like Etsy for Eric and Unstoppable, for all these little NFTs that are the first time Paul Barron was interviewed on blockchain. You can own that NFT. That NFT is worth $1.50 or $1,500, whatever it might be in the future. Could you imagine if you had the NFT of someone like Mark Cuban saying, "Listen, we're going to accept Dogecoin at the Dallas Mavericks," and he did that on CNBC. And if CNBC created an NFT for that, now it's a piece of internet lore, so to speak. But yeah, maybe it's valuable at some point, maybe it's not. But could you imagine if you had someone like I don't know, think about the history of just fast casual. Let's look at Steve Ells. Steve Ells created, or his first interview on the creation of Chipotle, his first interview after they reached 1,000 units. Those kinds of things could be easily created as art. But I think in culinary, we're going to see a lot more of this just because of its tie into visual and immersive experiences that eventually will become AR, VR. Apple's already working on this. They will most likely be the one that brings the iPhone VR concept to
Amazon
VR.
glasses that
Yeah.
they're making breakaway.
Yeah, I think that will be the first entry point into the metaverse, which just like Apple's an interesting angle because they have not played their card yet on metaverse. They're waiting patiently, I think.
So could sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead. Mainly to, I think, show up Zuckerberg.
So one thing, so with say again, back to like the podcast, I started Restaurant Unstoppable in 2012 because there is a digital track record there. Could I then go back in time and tag all those things as?
Absolutely. Yeah. You'd want to create an NFT library just for those moments in time.
Apple has so much data and content already on it. I feel like you can just go back and like, I guess, catalog.
Yeah, for sure. But I think that's going to be the element for culinary is right now it's still a 2D experience. At some point, Wolfgang Puck will have a 3D experience inside the metaverse, and that 3D experience will be, it could be a master creation that could be one of the best dishes ever, served in his restaurants. And now you own the NFT, and the value of that NFT is subjective because it's like any other piece of art.
Yeah. Okay. So I have a couple more questions and we can start to wrap it up. One question I have, and Bob, I know you have questions too, so I'm interested to see how this goes. Bob always has the greatest questions, or the opinions, I should say, too, as well. But they're always solid. But one thing that I'm curious about, and I'm sure you're familiar with Moore's Law, right? Somebody who's a futurist. There's Moore's Law, the
computing.
Technology improves at an exponential rate. Sometimes I wonder if technology is going to get to the point where it's improving so fast, so incredibly fast that
AI.
Well, here's the other thing: humans only evolve at a linear rate, in a very slow linear
right now,
until we start to interface with technology, which is the idea is like we're going to become cyborgs. And
if you look at what Musk is doing with Neuralink, that likelihood is real.
But I think it's going to take a while, because if the first people that start doing that, it's not going to be perfect. The connection between neuro and technologies, I feel like there's going to be some.
No doubt. I mean, just to go to that level, I mean, you already see a lot of the anti-aging investments that Jeff Bezos is doing. A lot of these billionaires have started to realize that, listen, they're mortal, and the one thing they have more than anything is money, not time,
to figure out these problems.
Yeah, they're going to figure these out. Just like Musk, his whole goal is to die on Mars, and I think this guy's going to do it.
Yeah,
in the essence of actually making it there. Yeah. Could you imagine that's your mission? I'm going to die on Mars.
What happens if you get there and you're not the only person there and you want to be the first person to die on Mars? You might have to make drastic actions.
Some adjustments.
So back to this idea of being, I think humans might be a governing variable for a while, in the sense that, yes, the technology is improving at an exponential rate, but until we're able to interface humanity in the subconscious and just the brain, I think we're going to hit a firewall at some point.
I don't know that I would agree with that, because I think quantum computing changes that. Quantum computing is something that our mind has yet to, well, I mean, obviously the best technologists in the world understand it and why it will change humanity. But quantum computing, if it in fact is close, like what a lot of people will allude that it is, including Google, that will be an unbelievable hyper shift in technology advancement for the human race.
Yeah. So the idea of quantum physics, and my understanding of quantum physics, you have one-dimensional, which is just flat, two-dimensional, which is vertical, three-dimensional, which is now you have shape to it, and then the fourth dimension is perspective.
Yes.
Like this might be my perspective of that three-dimensional object, but you on the other side of the room have a completely
Yeah.
different perspective of that same object from where you are. That's my understanding of quantum physics, because once you get to perspectives, the sky's the limit in any
Yeah.
form.
Yeah. I
So
think,
what does that mean for computers?
yeah, I think the scenario that we'll be facing in the next 2 decades is both quantum achievement and also AI. And when you combine those two elements together, um, in essence, if you can live for the next 20 years, I think disease is gone. I think the problems of humanity, war, space travel, and beyond is within the reach of maybe the generation that has been born already that are walking around on this planet today. But they're kids, they're my children, 5, 6 years old. But in 80 years, those kinds of things for that generation and the generation yet to come, I think is doable, but it's based on what is being done right now at probably some of the best, computer labs out there in the world. And a lot of blockchain will be involved in this because it's one of the true breakthrough technologies that Satoshi was able to create. And it's much like what Tim Berners-Lee, when he first really kind of created what we would know as the World Wide Web.
Yeah.
That's the kind of evolution that we're seeing. And in reality, all of this is still child's play.
Yeah. I mean, obviously I respect your opinion. You know a lot about this, but there's a part of me that feels like still there's some hesitance that I feel like there's certain, like, human beings evolved millions and millions of years to be our best form of ourselves 10,000 years ago. Then all of a sudden, after the agricultural revolution, things just started to change.
Exactly. Well, look at the exponential rate in terms of advancement in the last 200 years.
Yeah. But I wonder if we're going to hit a point where, yes, we can do all this stuff. And yes, it's exciting. We can do all this stuff, but is it necessarily going to mean we're going to be happier? Are we going to be able to
well, yeah, you're getting into some real heady
evolution. Yeah. Like, are we,
now you're talking about,
where we're just like, where we just can't, like, it's just not how we're meant to be. It's not how we're, because even I could argue, even with the digitization of just like even social media, and now, Dunbar's number, we can only manage 150 relationships. So as a result of having access to so many people, the quality of our relationships are being diluted. And
well, that's only if you're using the access to those people in the physical means. If you're using it through three-dimensional means, that completely changes the access.
What do you mean by three-dimensional means? Like in a VR?
No, well, in the early stages, I think in the primitive era of evolution, we'll be utilizing VR, as a way to interface quicker. But at some point, we're going to get into scenarios where the human mind is going to be communicating in multidimensional phases rather than what we're seeing right now. So much like whether you call it telekinetics or ESP or those kinds of things, eventually it's just unlocking the brain. Quantum computing and AI will help that occur.
I guess what I'm saying is I think we're coded to a certain degree to get the most out of a relationship in person because of all the things that are happening on the
only today. Only today.
I don't know how long it's going to take us to get to that point where me being in the same room with you, like
maybe 100 years.
Am I gonna be able to smell your pheromones virtually? Like
maybe,
possibly, but but there's just so much that we don't know about right now that happens in real life that we're still figuring out as far as like being able to communicate subconsciously. I can't, words not coming to my mind, but like just little things like this that we're just like, wow, like there's so much we're learning about ourselves just now. And that's the idea of like, I guess like relativity or like quantum physics, where like, yeah, we're learning more about the world of evolution and digitally evolving, but we're also learning more about organics and the depth of organics in the physical real world, and like how deeply that cuts,
Right.
So it's just a weird world. Like we're learning so much in so many different directions, and it's like the more I learn, the more I realize I don't know anything, and it's so frustrating. Okay, so we have a little bit of time, Paul. Bob, I know you have some, and we got to try to keep this quick because Paul only has 4 minutes left. Bob, I know you have some concerns. I might even just paraphrase that. As soon as the government kind of creates their own non-fungible token, that this is all going to dissolve, and this is just a fad or a trend. Maybe I'm oversimplifying.
Yeah, yeah, I would say that you know, a CBDC, central bank digital currency, is a good potential, but I think that it will run in unison with this asset class in general. Um, because the key there is a lot of people immediately uh, just drift to the fact that crypto is currency and really look past the idea that crypto is beyond just currency. If it's a Bitcoin, it's gold. I mean, gold exists beside the dollar. There will be a digital gold, and I believe that's going to be Bitcoin or Ethereum. There will be a digital silver. There will be a digital value in a lot of these kinds of assets that will coexist within all fiat systems, digital or otherwise. No different. I think it's just a new asset class that is just being recognized. You see too much going into the space for this to turn back now.
Yeah. So, Bob, go ahead and unmute your mic. Keep in mind, we got 3 minutes, so really try to come with a question.
Yeah,
So
you're okay.
Most of it. Go ahead, Bob.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm just going to expand upon, the comment that I made initially. I posted on the network the last week's White House activity in regards to all of this and
Right.
the Fed's reaction, and they're not in a hurry and blah, blah, blah. It's going to take them a little time to get their hands on everything. But I disagree with Paul in regards to the letting Bitcoin and Ethereum and a couple of the other cryptos exist. They're going to want to control this. They're going to want to centralize it.
So you're saying the whole idea
Yeah.
of centralization is gonna be
Yeah, it's okay. So the problem and the fallacy with that thought is that you're assuming the United States has control of this. So to be able to control something, you've got to be able to lock it down. The only thing you would do in that scenario is lock down the citizens of the United States from having access to those kinds of assets. If that is done at the stage in which crypto has been evolved to today in 2021, 22, is it would be like locking down the internet in 1999 from American citizens not be able to use it. But the rest of the world can use it. The rest of the world would advance. China would become the superpower. Russia would become a superpower. All of the South American countries, including India, Singapore, Asia, all of which have embraced blockchain technologies, would essentially, we'd be living in the 1960s, the United States, behind what the rest of the world is doing in terms of advancement. So everybody concerns themselves with currency, when in reality, the likelihood is this is going to be a coexisting model in which U.S. citizens and companies will be able to, at some point, legally invest in these assets here in the United States, rather than just buying a token on Coinbase or something of that nature. So that is the control. Sure, the U.S. government, along with many other G7 countries, G8 countries, will want to control any kind of means of fiat, but and they've been successful to do that with the history of gold. But the likelihood, and because of the decentralization of cryptocurrency in general, especially Bitcoin,
Do you
I think it's
that,
unstoppable.
Paul, do you think that the hierarchy with, the White House report is like, the first line of it is like an executive order, which scares the hell out of me. But, yeah, right. But, they could just make it illegal or make it their typical, we'll let you exist, but there's going to be regulations.
Oh, sure.
And
Yeah, I think
you have to go through the CBDC in order to exist.
Well, no, I mean, a CBDC is essentially taking a fiat dollar into a digital format for a central bank digital currency. Of course, at the same time, you'd have to pretty much eliminate the banking system as it's known today for that to occur, unless they became branches of the central bank, which could happen.
Well, I mean, the point that I'm making is because I'm really familiar with this space because I was the CFO of Hotspot, which did the platform for the planet for for currency exchange. And in some instances, they could easily just write a law that says you need to convert to their NFT or digital dollar in order to transact.
And for some of the listeners who are on my level, CBDC stands for central bank
digital currency.
Basically,
central bank digital currency
versus having it decentralized, open.
Yep. Yeah. So central bank digital currency is kind of the argument that I think everybody's making on a global level, because all nation states are trying to develop a CBDC. Whether it's Russia, China has already done it with the digital yuan. This has already been in case. Now, if you look at China, what they've done is it's not illegal to own crypto; it's illegal to trade it on platforms. The reason is they've tried to isolate in the digital yuan as the accepted digital currency. But the Chinese citizens still have the capability to essentially own crypto, so they can own Bitcoin.
So now is that the reason our friends in the Fed are not so in a hurry to do things? They're watching China's model.
I don't know that is the case. I really think it. I've had Tom Emmers, Congressman Emmers, on my show here. I would suggest everybody listen to that interview. He's a Republican, yes, of course, but
send me that link and I'll be sure to include it in the show.
Yeah, I'll send you a link to the video. It's a really good interview, and we've talked about it at length around what Biden's administration is trying to do with just digital currencies in general. But more importantly, it's what the SEC is doing. And all of this matters because how we set up these ground rules right now is much like what we did in early 2000 of how Congress set up ground rules for the internet. It was very light touch to not stifle innovation. Right now, we are at the risk, and this has happened in several of the congressional hearings that we've seen over the past 3 months, when many of the blockchain leaders around the world came in front of Congress and said, listen, the United States, for the first time in the history of our country, is behind in terms of technology advancement around the world. So it's likely that we'll see India, easily Asia, and it will be the Malaysian peninsula that will do it. South America, I think we'll see more spread from what's happening in El Salvador that will eventually make Bitcoin legal tender. And if we see more and more of that, along with issues of legalization around the innovation layer of blockchain, let's just forget about currency for a second. Just think innovation of what blockchain can do in terms of the tech. That's the one that concerns me the most. I'm much less more concerned about currency displacement as opposed to technology opportunity.
Yeah. And the one thing I just want to make sure I clarify for people, and I'm still learning a lot about this, but one of the reasons why governments want to centralize this is because typically the way governments work is by tracking and getting a cut. And if they control it, it's harder for them. It's easier for them to get the cut, but if they don't control it, they can't get their cut to.
Yeah. If this goes into right now, the problem is you cannot print more cryptocurrency in the essence of Bitcoin. Now, there are some projects out there that you can do that with, but a centralized digital dollar or a CBDC is no different than a fiat system. You can still create more tokens, we'll call them digital dollars, just like you can in the system today that we've basically overinflated our economy with, this massive printing. So this is still a problem from an economic standpoint that I think is one that has yet to be completely resolved. But besides all of the financial side of things, let's just think about what is driving the tech behind this, because that to me is the underlying. Imagine if you were the U.S. government and I mean, DARPA was really the creator of the internet anyway. So that was the U.S. government that created it, turned it loose on in the United States. And eventually, we have what we have, but they did a very light touch. They let innovation run rampant, and the United States became the greatest country in the world because of our technology prowess, without a doubt. China was chasing us. Russia was chasing us. Every first world country on the planet was chasing the United States over the past 2 decades. That's the problem that I see as the most worrisome to me is that we could lose that position.
Yeah. Paul, thank you so much for taking the time to join us. Hey, Bob, thank you for the great interaction as well at the end here. And just I want to let the listeners know if they want to connect with you, what's the best way to connect?
It's easy. Just hit me up on Twitter. It's at Paul Barron. DM me there. I usually answer all the DMs I can. So
if you want to stay up to breast with all the latest and greatest with this, what's happening with Bitcoin and blockchain, I highly recommend you guys follow Rebel Network. Paul's doing great stuff over there, as well as Foodable Network is doing an amazing job and just creating awesome content. I follow you guys. I get a lot of inspiration from you guys. And I'm happy to have you guys in my network for sure. And who do you respect and admire right now in the world of restaurants, specifically around blockchain and what's happening? And who should I get on the show? Call them out.
I think it's ironic. Chipotle, I think, has been, if you look at what Brian Niccol has done just there in his short period of time of transitioning Chipotle to a much more digital brand. If there is going to be an early mover, it most likely will come either from Chipotle. McDonald's may play in the space a little bit, but I feel like, Brian Niccol is probably the guy that could bridge that gap.
Touch with Brian Niccol by any chance, would you?
I might say something off camera.
All right. Thank you very much, Paul. This has been a great conversation. There is no questioning. You are unstoppable.